The NASDAQ by far is trading at a record high on this Wednesday. We're seeing tech stocks move higher. We're also seeing some action in the economic reopening stocks. So let's take a look at what's going on today with Shawn Cruz. He is the senior market strategist at TD Ameritrade. So, Shawn, tell me what's going on with the reopening trade?
Yeah, one thing that's been interesting is what has been happening with a lot of those stocks that are tied to people being a little bit more comfortable and getting out and about, traveling around a lot more. And with the resurgence of the Delta variant, it's really been driving a lot of volatility as sentiment around that ebbs and flows. So one thing I'm looking at is some of the airlines. There's a lot of concern of, is there going to be a little bit of a rebound? We saw some pretty high TSA checkpoint channel checks coming through leading up to around mid-August. And then in mid-August, you saw a significant drop-off as you saw COVID cases of the Delta variant continue to surge. But it's also something we heard from a lot of the travel agencies, Expedia Group being one of them, who's actually having a little bit of a better day today where the airlines are down. But they actually came out in July and highlighted that they were already starting to see some cancellations as a result of some concern from travelers over the Delta variant and how transmittable it is, some concern what they could mean for their health. So I think it makes sense as we get data coming in day to day to expect some choppiness and some volatilities out of this name and out of these names until we start to get a better sense for maybe a clearer path to vaccination rates getting up. Maybe the variants don't end up being as troublesome as maybe some have feared. Things like that are probably going to be what you want to keep an eye on as you're trying to find a way for these travel-related stocks to really start moving higher.
So you mentioned the volatility that you're seeing in the airline stocks, and I'm wondering is there certain groups or players in that sector that would fare better than others. And I'm thinking like, you got the big three, United, American, and Delta versus your JetBlues and Frontier. Is it that simple just to take a look at the separate ones that have a big international exposure versus the ones that have more domestic exposure because of business travel maybe not coming back as fast as people thought before?
Yeah, and that's a great point is not only the international travel, that is key. And you are hearing about restrictions being put in place out of the EU and other countries where they are a little bit more concerned about some of these variants getting transmitted internationally. That's certainly going to hurt those international stocks. But the other thing, and to your point about business travel, a lot of companies are now pushing back return to office. I think by and large, most companies are targeting September, October to start getting their workforces back in the office and maybe back to some sense of normalcy. It seems like every day you hear more companies pushing that back, and now most of them are now going out to January. So I think that is going to be one thing that can act as a little bit of an overhang for a lot of those major airlines that are tied more closely to business and international travel, where maybe some of your more domestic carriers might be a little bit faster to snap back as we start to see the situation with the Delta variant hopefully moderate or even start coming down a little bit. That might be what gets people at least comfortable getting out there for some leisure travel this fall. I think that is going to be the key. And if that is the case where leisure travel comes first, I would expect to see that show up in Southwest, JetBlues, some of those more domestic leisure type airlines.
And how are you feeling about another part of that genre, so to speak, the reopening trade? I'm thinking of like the restaurants. This week, Reuters, we had a story earlier this week that one of our reporters saw some internal memos that were sent out to franchisees, kind of telling them, giving them the criteria of when they should start to reclose indoor dining. There was a survey out also from saying that people are changing their restaurant behavior because of the Delta variant. So how are you feeling about, the restaurant chains?
Yeah, I think one thing that is key is start going through and looking at the different companies. Some companies just really need people to come in there, sit down at a table, order some drinks. Maybe the menus are a little bit more elaborate. Those companies are probably going to have maybe a little bit more of an impact, even if it's something as simple as people just maybe don't want to wear masks indoors out to a restaurant. They'd rather just stay at home and cook or stay at home and deliver. And so if you're thinking about maybe people staying at home and ordering delivery instead of going out to eat, then you can start looking at some of those companies who have done a very good job in the digital experience for their customers. And you can look at names like Chipotle. McDonald's has that partnership with Uber Eats. DoorDash has a lot of companies that are on there now too. Taco Bell's getting in there. So I think you can maybe start to go and maybe look for those companies that have been reporting solid digital sales. That might be the companies that are going to be in a good spot to really benefit from people staying at home, ordering more in-home delivery, or people going back out and getting into some of those restaurants.
So, as a market strategist and taking a look at this industry, the play rather, that is a little bit volatile right now, would you be looking for the downside to make entry points? Whether we're talking about restaurants, or we're talking about hotels, or we're talking about airlines, or would you be more advising to sit on the sideline until there's a more clearer picture?
So the interesting thing we're seeing out of a lot of these names is they actually try sort of establish this range that they trade back and forth in. And so maybe if you are seeing that range when we really just get a lot of negative sentiment out there in these companies, and you see them maybe pull back lower towards the lower end of some of those ranges, you can use that as an entry point. And it's always, I think, important to keep in mind, you don't have to go out there and put everything in all at once. You can slowly deploy your capital, but make sure you're deploying that capital may be predicated on your expectations for the longer run outlook of the business. That can make it a little bit easier for you to handle some of these choppy days if you are maybe buying on some weakness, but you also have that understanding that there is going to be some volatility, but within a range until we really get a better handle on how this Delta variant is going to impact a lot of those companies.
All right, great. That's Shawn Cruz. He's the senior market strategist at TD Ameritrade. I'm Conway G. Gittens, and this is Reuters.